My lords, ladies and gentlemen, it is my most sorrowful duty to announce to you the death of my beloved mother, the Queen. I know how deeply you, the entire nation, and I think I may say the whole world, sympathise with me in the irreparable loss we've all suffered. I am deeply aware of this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty, which have now passed to me. In taking up these responsibilities, I shall strive to follow the inspiring example I have been set in upholding constitutional government and to seek the peace, harmony and prosperity of the peoples of these islands and of the Commonwealth realms and territories throughout the world. And in carrying out the heavy task that has been laid upon me, and to which I now dedicate what remains to me of my life, I pray for the guidance and help of Almighty God.
By the grace of God of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of his other realms and territories, King, Head of the Commonwealth, Defender of the Faith, to whom we do acknowledge all faith and obedience with humble affection, beseeching God, by whom kings and queens do reign, to bless his majesty with long and happy years to reign over us. God save the King!
God save the King!
Well, it is a gathering of people who have held or do hold considerable weight and power in the story of the United Kingdom. And they're gathering for the first part of the Accession Council. They're referred to generally as the Lords of the Council, who are added to by representatives of the Commonwealth and by Archbishops of Canterbury and former Archbishops and other appointments, including from the City of London by old tradition going back to the days of Queen Elizabeth I. And they're gathered here to witness the first part of this council. Normally, privy councils, the word privy is where the secret of it is, where private. Former Archbishop of Canterbury there and of York. And they, all of them, have held an appointment and therefore can witness the procedure that we will see. At the allotted point, the current acting Lord President of the Council, who is the Right Honourable Penny Mordaunt, I say acting, her appointment was approved by the late Queen, and she will lead the Council now.
Please make sure mobile
and other members of the royal family who are gathered, along with Privy Councillors who are selected, the Archbishop of Canterbury and others will sign the proclamation, ending up with the Earl Marshal and the Lord President herself. At this point there will be other business, and then the Privy Councillors who are going to go and meet the King will leave this picture gallery and head through to the throne room.
Now, who is on the Royal Mile in Edinburgh, and Joe, extraordinarily moving scenes there.
Yes, Mark, a hushed crowd, 10 to 15 deep, as the Queen's cortege came past here, past St Giles Cathedral, the High Kirk of Edinburgh, a medieval parish church which will be at the centre of tomorrow's proceedings and ceremonies. Much of the crowd has now dispersed, walking one way down the mile, down the High Street, the Canongate to Holyrood Palace, where the Queen's coffin now is, at the foot of the Salisbury Crags, and opposite, of course, the Scottish Parliament. This place will be at the centre of proceedings tomorrow, because we know there will be a procession with the King taking part on foot behind his mother's hearse to this historic church at almost a midpoint of the Royal Mile. There will be a ceremony, a service tomorrow before that 24-hour vigil where Scots and many visitors to the city will be able to pay their respects. And talking to the crowds here, it really is a mixture of locals, but also many visitors, many tourists too, because the Mile, of course, is at the centre of the history and the tourism of this city. I've talked to people from America, from Japan, from Denmark, people for whom either were here on holiday and have changed their plans or have specifically decided to travel, talking to each other in the crowd, introducing themselves, a very warm atmosphere. And the rain did hold off until after the cortege had moved past. It's also worth reflecting at this point that Her Majesty did adapt throughout her reign as the constitution of this country shift. She was at the centre of some key moments, such as the start of devolution, the opening of the Scottish Parliament in 1999, and of course she formed close relationships with First Ministers as well as Prime Ministers. Prime Ministers being invited to Balmoral each summer for 2 nights, First Ministers for 1, because she understood, as her son, the King Charles does, the importance of maintaining those relationships when, of course, Mark, the constitutional position of Scotland within this union still remains up for debate north of the border.
OK, Joe, thank you very much indeed. Well, what about here? As I was saying, the crowds are still coming. Sky's Kamali Melbourne is among them here at Buckingham Palace. Let's go and talk to Kamali.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, and you're right, the crowds are still coming. There's still just tens of thousands of people over there on the Mall lining up, trying to get closer to the palace. The security guards here have been telling people there are no more royal movements yet. People are still lined up along the barriers, waiting, anticipating, hoping, of course, to get another glimpse of the royals. Of course, we know that King Charles is inside Buckingham Palace right now, and people are still waiting, even though, as I said, the security guards have told them that really it's time for them to move on. And people have been coming here all day. Mark, you're right, there's been just a steady stream of people. I've been here since very early in the morning, and it hasn't stopped. People have been coming, paying their tributes, leaving their flowers, and just being in this sort of family atmosphere. And there's a few people here that I want to just speak to. Hi guys, just quickly, we're on live on Sky News. You're the first guys I've seen picnicking. You decided to bring a little snack as well. Hello, love.
It's a long wait for us, but it's nice to be here. And it's a nice day as well. The weather held out for us, so it's lovely.
Why do you think it's important to come and pay your respects to the Queen and bring the family here as well?
I think we're just discussing as a family. Some of our parents weren't born here, but part of the Commonwealth. But our children are, and they're British citizens, and they wanted to come and lay flowers for the Queen, leave a note to commemorate her 70 years of reign. So we brought them here for the experience.
Do you want to say a little something about why you came? No, you don't. You got shy now. You were talking to me before. You at least wanted to be on telly before. Ma'am, would you like to say a few words as to why you think it's important to come here?
Born in Jamaica, part of the Commonwealth. I've lived here most of my years, but it's important to bring my children and my grandchildren to see the heritage. And it's such a sad day, you know, I'm feeling for the Queen. So we had to come and lay some flowers.
It's a lovely sentiment, and everyone's having a nice time, and you've had snacks. I might stop by as well because I'm a little hungry. It's been a long day for me. Thank you very much for talking to us. So look, people have just been coming here all day. Let me just show you, there's been areas to lay sort of floral tributes, flowers, of course, and little messages for people. And here's one that has kind of spontaneously started to be used by people, because the security guards have been kind of moving away a lot of the flowers from various places. But you can see here, people have just been gathering, leaving their flowers, leaving their messages, taking their pictures, of course, but really wanting to be here for this historic moment and spend time with like-minded people have all come here for the same thing, to honour the Queen and wish the new King all the very best.
Kamali, thank you very much indeed. Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has been speaking about the Queen's legacy and the future of the Commonwealth.
Well, I think across the Commonwealth it's very important to recognise that every country will evolve in its own way according to their tradition and their wishes. I think the King will be an incredible head of the Commonwealth and has an ability to bring people together. I know that he has a very, very deep commitment to the Commonwealth. So, of course, different countries will evolve in different ways, but I think that the King will strengthen that bond with the Commonwealth.
Let's bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig. And John, I know that there's been a couple of days of tributes from politicians. What happens with the politics of all this now?
Well, before I tell you about that, Mark, let me just explain that Sir Keir Starmer there was responding to some comments made by the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda in the Caribbean. That is Gaston Brown, who was talking about the possibility of his country having a referendum on the country becoming independent in the next 3 years. Mr Brown said it's not a matter of hostility or differences between the countries of Antigua and Barbuda and the monarchy. He's talking about the final step to complete the circle of independence. Remember, this follows talks about independence in Jamaica after a visit by William and Kate, the new Prince and Princess of Wales. They were criticised for shaking hands with people through a mesh fence and also looking very colonial in an old Land Rover. Anyway, the better news on the countries becoming independent, of course, it came overnight in an interview with Sky News. The Prime Minister of Australia, the new Labour Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, told Sky News no independence moves there for 3 years. So that's that issue. Now, what's happening here? Further events over the next few days, Mark. Now, in about an hour's time, there's a service for MPs and peers in St Margaret's Church, just across the road from Parliament, the little church next door to Westminster Abbey. Then tomorrow, big event tomorrow, in the morning, the King and Queen consort, that's Charles and Camilla, are coming to Westminster Hall, where both Houses of Parliament, MPs and peers, are going to meet to express their condolences. The King will make his reply. What we are expecting is speeches, more pledges of loyalty, following the humble addresses in the Commons and the Lords yesterday. The Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, will speak. Then the Lord Speaker, that's Lord McFall. Then the King will reply. Then, of course, the King and Queen are off to Scotland, where, among other things, they'll meet. They'll go to the Scottish Parliament. They'll meet the First Minister. Number 10 have stressed today that unlike an announcement yesterday when they said the PM was joining the King and Queen, they're not accompanying them, and she's attending the church services. Some criticism after the announcement that the Prime Minister would be joining them on what was described as a tour, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Then, of course, the lying of state here in Westminster starts on Wednesday, Westminster Hall. I can tell you there are massive preparations taking place in and around the Houses of Parliament for that. Massive crowds expected for that. That's the lying in state starting on Wednesday.
OK, John, thank you very much indeed. A busy week ahead. Clearly, it has been planned in the finest detail, and we now know that the events that will take place. But the event that took place today was truly moving. We have seen the Queen's cortege make its way to Edinburgh, a 175-mile journey, finally ending up in Edinburgh, wending its way through Aberdeenshire, through Angus and Tayside, before reaching the Palace of Holyrood House, you see there, where the Queen will lie at rest in the palace overnight. And on Monday, there will be a procession from the palace to St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh, where the coffin will rest again this time for 24 hours, and that will be to allow the people of that city, the people of Scotland, to pay the respects that they want to pay to their monarch.
Well, this is Sky News, live from the Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh. A last great journey. The Queen's coffin leaves Balmoral this morning for a slow route to Edinburgh. People lined the streets and roads as the hearse made its way across Scotland. Before eventually arriving at the Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh, where her children paid their respects.
And I'm live at Buckingham Palace this evening, where the new king has held meetings with the Commonwealth and the realm, as crowds gathered to get a glimpse of their king and the Queen consort, but also to pay tribute to the late Queen.
God save the King!
Earlier, proclamations for King Charles III held around the four nations. And the Queen is remembered around the world, and in an international exclusive, Australia's Prime Minister tells Sky News there'll be no break with the monarchy in the near future.
It will need to continue to move with the times. But the bigger questions about our Constitution are not ones for this current period.
Hello, good evening. You're watching Sky News at 5. People have had their final chance to say farewell to Elizabeth II today as her coffin took its final journey through Scotland. Leaving Balmoral this morning, the procession led by the hearse carrying the Queen's coffin, which was followed by the Princess Royal. It has now arrived in Edinburgh, where it will rest in the Palace of Holyrood House until tomorrow afternoon. Well, James Matthews has our first report of the Queen's final journey.
Through the gates of Balmoral, it was the quietest farewell. Rural Aberdeenshire, its birdsong and the rumble of the River Dee laid the soundtrack for a sight most saddening. The hearse carried the Queen's coffin wrapped in the Royal Standard of Scotland. The wreath on top was made from her favourite flowers, picked from the Balmoral garden. In the car behind, the Queen was escorted by her daughter, the Princess Royal, and her husband, Sir Tim Lawrence. The geography of circumstance had placed the Queen in Balmoral when she passed. At journey's end, there will be a state funeral, set-piece ceremony and all that. But between here and there, this was an informal farewell, an opportunity for the public to say their goodbyes. In Ballater, near Balmoral, they lined the streets. Here, they knew her as the Queen next door. Their village was her village.
We're so fond of this area. It's just a very, very sad day for us all.
Very emotional today and very proud to be part of the United Kingdom. So, yeah.
I cried. Everybody here, you'll see them all crying.
I just found it really emotional. It's almost like saying goodbye to a family member. It's just really, really upsetting.
Tractors were positioned by the side of the road, an agricultural guard of honour, as the cortege wound a route through rural Scotland. Horse riders, too, formed up in a field by the roadside as it made its slow 6-hour journey south. This journey had been meticulously planned. Even if there was no public rehearsal, here in Bankery there was applause. Elsewhere there was silence. Everywhere there was respect and remembrance.
It was quite overwhelming, to be honest. I'm very, very proud to be here.
I've never come along to anything like this before, but just really felt that I wanted, it was important.
It's an honour, it's beautiful. Once in a lifetime, it's not going to happen again.
People lined dual carriageways linking Aberdeen, Dundee and Edinburgh beyond, and they looked on from walkways overhead. Closer to Edinburgh, the cortège crossed the Firth of Forth via the Queensferry Crossing, a bridge officially opened by the Queen in 2017. Members of the royal family had travelled ahead by helicopter to fulfil their duties. Once in Edinburgh, the Queen's coffin was driven through the streets towards Holyrood, in the city's old town. The Royal Regiment of Scotland formed a guard of honour at the Palace of Holyrood House, and the Queen's coffin was received with a royal salute. It's being placed in the throne room overnight to allow palace staff to pay their respects. As the Queen was carried inside, a daughter curtsied to her mother, her duty done. This was day one of the Queen's long goodbye, which will span a nation that grew with her, and having learned of her loss, is learning to live with it. James Matthews, Sky News, in Ballater.
Well, let's bring in our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, and now the Queen's coffin at rest in the throne room in the palace behind us. Yeah. But leaving the tranquility and privacy of Balmoral, where her family effectively had to say goodbye before it was opened up to the public, effectively.
And you and I this week have both been at Balmoral for different reasons. I was there for the Prime Minister handover, and you were there after we heard of the Queen's death. And the thing that hits you there is the seclusion, the privacy. And I think for her family, it was the perfect place for them to try to, in some way, come to terms with what is a huge shock for so many. But they're also so conscious of the fact that this is a moment of grief, of mourning, that the public want to be able to share in. And that's what we saw today, as we saw the funeral, the coffin leaving Balmoral there. The heads of the police officers bowed. And it was very quiet. And I think also as the coffin came here to Edinburgh, there were quiet ripples of applause, but also a silence, because I think it has also happened so quickly. And as we've spoken about today, often it is when you see a coffin that finally that news begins to sink in. But it was so striking, wasn't it, to see how many people had come out onto the streets of Edinburgh here, but also the likes of Dundee. We saw all of the farmers with their tractors as well, everyone wanting to pay their tribute. And the fact that she died here in Scotland has allowed another important part of her United Kingdom, what was her United Kingdom, to come out and pay their tribute. Of course, this evening, it's now the royal household who can quietly, peacefully pay their own private respects, as tomorrow we wait again to see the new king join his siblings who are already here in Edinburgh, as we saw as the Queen's coffin arrived, and we will see them attend that service of Thanksgiving at St Giles.
Well, the cortège passing from Edinburgh Castle down the Royal Mile to here at the Palace of Holyrood House, and Joe Pike is at St Giles Cathedral, the High Kirk, and witnessed the cortège passing amidst the crowds there, Joe.
Yes, Anna, they were 10 to 15 people deep. Some had been waiting many hours. They were calm. The crowd was pretty hushed, introducing themselves to each other over the hours, starting this wait as strangers and ending it as not quite friends, but people who had shared quite a special moment. That spontaneous applause certainly touching for some. I'll step out of the way of the shot so you can see what the cortège passed, this stunning building, the Cathedral of St Giles, the High Kirk of Edinburgh, and standing in front of it, watching the hearse and the cortege come past, the statue of the 5th Duke of Buccleuch, a man who would have known a lot about these sort of ceremonies because he played a key role in them, including the time of Queen Victoria. This is the place that will be at the centre of some of tomorrow's proceedings. That is when King Charles will follow his mother's hearse up the Royal Mile from the Palace of Holyrood House to St Giles. That service will take place, and then there will be a vigil for 24 hours, Anna, allowing the people of Scotland to pay their respects before the Queen's coffin is taken down to London.
Joe Pike, thank you very much indeed there. Joe stood there on the Royal Mile. Well, the Queen and the royal family have been dedicated to their faith, attending a special Christmas service at Sandringham every year. Today, of course, Sunday, and the Queen has been remembered in churches right across the country. Well, Caterina Vitozzi has been to a service in Liverpool and sent this report.
She is the only monarch most of us have ever known. And today, at Liverpool Parish Church, the late Queen was mourned by some like a member of family. This was a special requiem service, a chance to remember an extraordinary life.
We give you thanks for her love of family and her gift of friendship, for her devotion to this nation and the nations of the Commonwealth.
The Queen's passing brings global cultural change and a new national anthem with unfamiliar words. Arthur Speed, who's 77, remembers the previous king, but the late Queen became his constant.
She was a one-off, wasn't she? What a lovely, lovely lady. Lovely. And when I was at sea, every Friday, 7 o'clock, we used to toast the Queen. But we've got to look forward to King Charles. Hopefully he'll do as good as his mum. I'm sure he will.
Church services like this one held here today and those indeed across the country and the Commonwealth have given people a chance to pay tribute to the late Queen. But in many ways they also reflect the way in which Queen Elizabeth II lived her own life. At her coronation 70 years ago, the Queen pledged to lead the Church of England. But the public pageantry was matched by personal faith. Seen in times of celebration like Christmas Day trips to church, or more recently at the funeral of her late husband. Her role as defender of the faith will be remembered.
Her late Majesty taught us much, if not more, about God and grace, both in words and the actions that reinforce them, than any other contemporary figure.
That's lovely. The Queen once said her faith guided her through good times and bad. It feels then particularly poignant that places of worship like Lichfield Cathedral in Staffordshire have become such focal points during this time of national mourning.
She was just like the nation's grandma, weren't she? Everyone just loved her. There was nothing not to love about her, really.
She's really important for everyone, and a lot of people looked up to her and thought she was amazing, really, and I did as well.
It's a sense many share, a feeling many will miss. Caterina Vitozzi, Sky News.
Well, let's bring in our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, once again, and certainly tomorrow the focus will be on the church service we will see and the procession of members of the royal family from the palace here up the Royal Mile to St Giles Cathedral.
And I think, again, tomorrow, a reminder of how it was the Queen's personal faith that really sustained her throughout her reign. She didn't see that role as a chore. She saw it as a role that she was born to fulfil. And her personal religious faith, her Christianity, We always saw that within, for example, her Christmas messages. It was there to be seen. And tomorrow we will see this service of remembrance, of thanksgiving. And for everyone involved, yes, again, it's a time where we will see the royal family. So we will see them leave the palace of Holyrood House. The new king, King Charles III, will be here with his Queen Consort in the morning to join the Queen's other children and spouses who we've seen as the coffin arrived earlier. Some of them will walk behind the coffin, in which will be, I think, an incredibly touching moment, no doubt very resonant of when we saw them walking behind Prince Philip's coffin at his funeral. They will then pause, remember her at that service of thanksgiving. But I'm told that service is also about bringing Scotland together. It's very inclusive. It's not just the great and the good. It's not just political figures. It's making sure that every aspect of society is represented. And no doubt also members of the royal household who we know are now going to be central to the plans. And isn't it remarkable that so far the plans have run so smoothly? Nothing has gone wrong in terms of that procession coming here to Holyrood. And for them, no doubt, this is incredibly difficult. They are feeling deep mourning. They knew the Queen personally. They felt her kindness and her warmth. Now they want to do the right thing. They want this to be the most fitting tribute possible for her, as tonight, as Alistair Bruce said earlier, she is now home.
Rhiannon, thank you.
Well, good evening to you from Buckingham Palace. King Charles III has held meetings with the Secretary-General of the Commonwealth, as well as the High Commissioners from the countries where he is now head of state. Today's events are just the start of a list of duties for the King over the coming days. Sky's royal correspondent Laura Bundock has this report.
With flourish and fanfare, and from every corner of the United Kingdom,
3 cheers for His Majesty the King. Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray!
the pageantry of proclamation. And as his reign is confirmed, the new king already at work. Head of the Commonwealth and meeting its leaders. He is, for now, head of state in 14 realms, but knows some are already questioning their royal relationship. Supported by the Queen Consort, these are important moments for the new monarch. And on top, meetings too, finalising his mother's funeral.
It's an opportunity for us to grieve. It's an opportunity for us to try and put some of our gratitude and remembrance into words. It's an opportunity for us to pray for ourselves and for our new king and his family. And it's an opportunity, I think, for us all to have a focus for our grief.
Buckingham Palace now has this almost surreal dual role. On the one hand, it is a focal point for people mourning the Queen. But as they gather outside, inside, the King is just getting on with the job, with his new role and responsibilities. He is keen to reassure at this unsettling time, taking a tour of the nations. First stop Scotland, where there is a huge sense of expectancy.
I think he has been taught well by his mother. She's a great role model for him. And I honestly think we'll see a very compassionate king, a king who will look to unite the country.
I would hope he would continue along the path that she treads so well. I think he'll be a little bit more outspoken, I imagine, about environmental issues, because their cause is close to his heart. And I think he'll probably work to modernise the monarchy.
The King will also travel to Northern Ireland and Wales, creating connections and meeting people in the countries he now rules. Laura Bundock, Sky News, Buckingham Palace.
And Laura is with me now. So these are busy days for the new king.
They are. And what I think is striking is that while you have people here and big crowds gathering to mark the end of this era. At the same time, we don't get a transition period. The new era has begun and it is well underway. And the office, as Buckingham Palace is where the King is, you know, with another day of firsts. Yesterday it was meeting political leaders. Today, the Commonwealth, this family of nations, a family he knows was so close to his mother's heart, and a family of nations that really, some would say, is a big part of her legacy. And he knows the meetings are important. These are difficult, diplomatic and very delicate times. You know, the number of Commonwealth realms that he is now head of state for has been dwindling over the years. And he knows there are a lot of countries now very much considering and debating their own futures with him as head of state. So important meetings underway there. He was there, of course, when Barbados declared itself a republic last year. Others are in the pipeline as well. For now, though, I think it was a day of meetings, but important meetings regarding the funeral as well. So as well as that sort of side of the job, he's got this difficult job of planning his mother's funeral. And it's been planned, obviously, for years and years. But he had an important meeting today, signing off some of those final details. And he will want to get it right. He will want to make sure he's been able to sign off those details. So it is a difficult time. And then, of course, this huge tour of the nation starting tomorrow with Scotland, then to Northern Ireland, then to Wales as well. Very much wanting to be out there, to be seen, to be able to, as he said, sort of share the grief of the people who he is now head of state for.
OK, Laura, thank you very much indeed. Well, joining me now is Tony Juniper, the chair of Natural England. Tony, thank you very much for being with us. And just first of all, I thought I'd ask you about the scenes that we've been witnessing today with the Queen's cortege heading towards Edinburgh, where it is now, and all the people coming out.
Well, Mark, just to say that I'm appearing this afternoon in a personal capacity, not as the chair of Natural England, and appearing as someone who's worked with the Prince of Wales for a long time on some of his environmental causes, and like everybody else, looking at the images coming through, deeply saddened and deeply touched by the way in which everyone's reacting to the passing of the Queen. It's an incredibly sad moment, and no sadder for anyone other than the Prince of Wales and his family, once Prince of Wales, now King Charles, and his family, as they come to face the coming period, including all the complexities of the handover, which your coverage was touching on a moment ago.
Yes, you mentioned environmental issues, and clearly these are issues that, he was the Prince of Wales, now King Charles, is passionate about.
Yes, indeed, and I was privileged to be able to work quite closely with him over a period of years on a variety of different subjects that he sought to make progress on, sustainable agriculture and food security, the huge question of climate change, deforestation in the tropical countries, the health of the marine environment. And the reason why he has been so devoted to doing something about all of those things is really because of the impact that an unhealthy environment has on people. And if you look at what he's been doing over the years, he's talked about farmers as much as he has about farming. And when it comes to the health of the marine environment, working and engaging with communities whose livelihoods had been hit by the collapse of fish stocks. And then when it came to the tropical rainforests, it wasn't only the wildlife that he was concerned about, but also the culture and the sustaining of the rainforest peoples who lived there. And the sense of empathy he's brought to all of this in terms of seeing how the people are being affected by these environmental changes really has been front and centre at what he's all about. And I think, you know, the service and devotion that he devoted to all of that, I think is an excellent sign of what he will do as king.
Well, that's an interesting point. I mean, he was clearly influential on these issues as the Prince of Wales. Will he find a way, do you think, to be as active on this, despite assuming the role of king?
Well, like everyone else, I listened to his address the other evening, and he was very clear that things will change. He will need to stand aside from some of the work that he's been doing with his charities and so on. And, you know, that is inevitable and not apart from anything else, the time we'll have available for those subjects is going to be considerably diminished. And just listening to some of the work that's on his hands already in terms of the Commonwealth and beyond, this is going to be an incredibly demanding role that he's acknowledged will need to change the way in which he works.
I mean, he also mentioned that he was looking to William to take some of this over. Do you think that William will be active on this subject? After all, he's got already the Earthshot Prize, I think it is, William, isn't it?
Yes, Prince William has already been engaging on some of these environmental questions and has been for some years. And indeed, I remember a few years ago, the Duke of Edinburgh, the then Prince of Wales, and then the Duke of Cambridge working together on the illegal wildlife trade, bringing together an enormous global coalition of organisations to work on the scourge of continued hunting of animals like elephants. And, it's already been there in his work, and the Earthshot you mentioned is another example of that. I was really struck on the day of the big Saturday celebration at the time of Her Majesty's Jubilee back in early June this year, and the evening speeches which were given by the then Prince of Wales and Duke of Cambridge. And it was really striking the extent to Prince William going on the environmental theme. It was really very powerfully put across by him, the need to be taking a different approach on sustaining the natural world and avoiding the worst of climate change. It was a message that could equally have come from his father. And I don't know if that was some kind of sense of the baton being handed on, but it did seem like that up to a point. And, I think it's worth just reflecting on the extent to which, that this has been an endeavour that hasn't only been the Prince of Wales in his previous incarnation. His father, as I say, was very, very strongly engaged with this work, including through being president of WWF International for a long time, alongside other work that he did, including being involved in the early days with the setting up of the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust. So this is something that you can chart across the decades and across the family. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if we see a more prominent role now for Prince William in taking this discussion further.
OK, Tony Juniper, good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Right, what about what's happening here? Sky's Kamali Melbourne is among the crowds of people still coming here, still gathering here to pay their respects to the Queen. Kamali.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, and they are still gathering. I mean, people just keep walking along the Mall. I don't know if you can pick this up over there. It's about 10 people deep there, gathered along the railings, waiting here to pay their respects. Now, the security guards have told us there are no more royal movements today, and the security guards just here in front of us are trying to move the barriers forward to create more space because people keep arriving. I've been here since about 7 o'clock this morning, and there have been just tens of thousands of people coming. It's always hard to judge the crowd numbers, but the police were expecting there to be millions of people coming every single day. As you can see, they're making a bit more space because it's becoming a bit of a bottleneck. There are so many people who are coming here to try and pay their respects to the Queen, and obviously wish our new King the best of luck. And Katie has come in here. Hello,
Hiya.
Katie. Thank you so much for talking to us. Has come here with these your girls.
Yeah, they are my daughters.
Hello, girls. How are you? Why did you decide to come down here today, Katie?
To pay some respects. What she's done for our country is amazing. So if this is what we can do to say thank you, then it's a small price to pay, isn't it?
How long have you been waiting here to
We got here
see
about
things?
1 o'clock this afternoon.
Did you get to see him drive in?
We didn't know because it was just too many people. It was just so many people. So we've come back this afternoon to try and hopefully get front row seats.
Are you just waiting, hoping that he comes out again?
Yeah, and then we've got flowers to lay in tribute. So
It's a really lovely thing to do, isn't it? What do you make of the people you've been around
it's so overwhelming, so overwhelming. But it's a real calm, sort of sombre atmosphere. It's really lovely.
It's kind of quiet, isn't it? But a really respectful, sort of calm.
It is really respectful, really calm, really comforting, really.
Yeah. I mean, it's really nice, and so many families here as well. I know you said you didn't want to talk to me. Do you want to say a little something? You're live on telly, all right? Your sister will say something. Why do you think it's important to come here to say something for the Queen?
She's done a lot for our country. I think the least we could do is pay a little bit of respect to her by laying flowers and greeting the new King.
You're happy to hang out here? You've been here for quite a few hours now. You might have to wait a little bit longer.
I know, my legs are hurting, but it's not too bad. It's worth it.
It shows the commitment that you've got and the respect that you've got for the royal family. Thank you so much, Katie.
Thank
really
you.
lovely speech. Have a good evening. I hope you don't have to wait too much longer. Hope he does come out. Look, people, as I said, just keep coming. There we go. Thousands here. I mean, as I said, the police are expecting there to be at least 2 million visitors every day, and that's the same thing that we hear from everyone. Katie telling us that it's worth the wait to try and show their respect and their love for the royal family, the passing of the Queen, and giving the best of starts to the new king.
Kamali, thank you very much indeed. With me now is the former Royal Press Secretary, Patrick Harrison. Thank you so much for being. Let's just talk about what Kamali was talking about. And this, I mean, it's an endless queue of people just patiently waiting, very slowly coming up to the palace.
Yes, indeed. And they want to be part of history, don't they? But I'm sure many of them also would have laid flowers and take a moment to reflect upon Her Majesty. And it's quite interesting. It's quite quiet for a very big crowd. It's quite quiet, isn't it? And then you get the occasional cheer as someone goes past or a car emerges. Yeah, and it's fascinating that they keep coming and will continue to do so.
And those images that we saw earlier, the people coming out to watch the very sad spectacle of the Queen's cortege,
yes.
That was, well, it was just overwhelming, wasn't it?
Well, it was incredibly moving, wasn't it? When we saw the coffin for the very first time emerge from Balmoral and start, as the King said, her last great journey. And people in towns, in villages, the farmers that you featured earlier, paying their respects quietly for most of the route, and then just a ripple of applause when the coffin finally came into Edinburgh.
Now, you worked for the then Prince of Wales, now King. What sort of king? I mean, if anything is to go by the first few days, it's going to suggest that he's going to be a very hard-working king.
Well, he's an incredibly hard-working man. I've never worked for anybody more hard-working than the Prince of Wales as he was, our king now. I remember a time when we were on a flight over to America on a commercial flight, and everybody in the entourage was watching one of the films, and there was only one person working, and that was the then Prince of Wales. Very, very committed. We know incredibly passionate about the issues and the charities as he was Prince of Wales, but also that great sense of public duty. He's been in public service for over 50 years, and it will be that sense of duty that will guide him now.
Well, I mean, we were listening to Tony Juniper there. He was talking about his passion for the environment, yes, and those other issues. And he's also got, you know, other subjects like the Commonwealth to deal with, yes, meeting the High Commissioners, yes, today. But on things like the environment, presumably he's now going to have to slightly rein things in.
Well, he made it very clear a couple of years ago that he clearly understood the difference between being Prince of Wales and being king, and he won't be able to do all the things that he did previously. In fact, a few years ago, his charities, some of his main charities, were put on a slightly more independent footing, you know, in anticipation of today. But the environment is something that we all have consensus around now, and I, for one, am thrilled that we have a head of state who cares so deeply about an issue which affects all our lives.
Now, talk to me a bit about what will be going on in the palaces right now. Clearly, it's a very busy week, culminating with the funeral, but that will have been planned in the most minute detail already.
Meticulously, and I remember working on the plans of London Bridge as it's known, you know, 15, 20 years ago. And of course they evolve over time, these plans, but yes, every detail meticulously covered, with a few final decisions to be made at the time. We're just seeing someone come through now. We've got an escort.
We hear the cheers first, and then we wait to see if we can...
I think this...
Yes, it's the...
I think...
Difficult to know whether it's King Charles or
I think
Camilla.
that might be King Charles.
Yes.
Coming past. And this, of course, is what the crowd has been waiting for a number of hours now, to get a glimpse... Yes, it is him. Yeah. Get a glimpse of their new king as he goes past.
Is it? Yes. and they come past because he doesn't seem to be living at the palace. He's living at Clarence House, am I right in saying?
Yes, well, of course, Clarence House was up until Thursday his London residence, and so a lot of his personal effects, but also, of course, staff and offices are all operating still out of Clarence House, as well as Buckingham Palace.
And you were talking about the minute planning going into this. Would you say that things are going to plan?
Absolutely, 100% going to plan at the moment, and various people have said that it's been pitch perfect to date, and I would definitely agree with that.
And what kind of funeral do you think we can expect? Clearly a state funeral.
Yes, a state funeral, and a moment when the eyes of the world really are on this country, and we've got a number of really emotional moments before then, of course, not least the vigil at St Giles tomorrow, when the King will keep vigil by his mother's coffin, and then, of course, the funeral Monday week is the sort of climax of everything that leads up to that, and the eyes of the world very much on it, and we'll have, of course, representatives from countries all over the world at that event.
It's interesting, isn't it, meeting the Secretary General of the Commonwealth and the High Commissioners of the Commonwealth countries. He seems very relaxed about the Commonwealth. It obviously means a lot to him, but in terms of some countries, resetting the relationship, he says, look, these countries have to decide for themselves.
Absolutely. He's always said, I'm here to serve as long as you want me, basically. And that's his view. But you'll see how important it is to him, the fact that meeting the High Commissioners tonight, that's one of the priorities of his new reign. We're only in the third day of it, and already that's one of the key priorities.
Yeah, I'm told he has gone to Clarence House, so he's gone home for a while. So, I mean, just finally on William and Harry and those pictures yesterday, this is a difficult time for the brothers. Do you think they were right to do that?
Yeah, I absolutely think they were right to do it, and I think they took their cue from their father in that first address that he made to the nation, that wonderful, heartfelt address where he paid tribute to his mother, his wife Camilla, but also to both of his sons. I thought that was very significant, and I think they picked up on that, and I think it was wonderful to see them go out together with their wives.
All right, thank you very much indeed for now. We'll be back with you a little later. I'm joined now by a former Conservative minister, Sir Nicholas Soames, who's also the grandson of Sir Winston Churchill and a close friend, I should say, of King Charles. Good of you to join us today. And just first of all, the pictures that we have been witnessing today with the Queen's cortege, I wonder what you made of those.
Well, good evening, Mark. I thought they were deeply touching and very moving, and I was particularly struck with, I happened to switch on to see the Queen's, Her Majesty's, late Majesty's coffin going through Dundee, where there were enormous crowds. And then I thought the arrival in Edinburgh at the Palace of Holyrood was unbelievably dignified and sombre. I mean, these are very, very historic and sombre days, and the ritual and the procedure is being carried out absolutely perfectly. In my view, it's immaculate.
Yes, and the reaction in the last couple of days clearly shows the affection in which she was held across this country.
I don't think there's any doubt about that at all. And I think the crowds in London and elsewhere are absolute evidence of that. I think people find themselves much sadder, I think, than anyone sort of thought. It's interesting hearing the interviews with people, some of whom have never bothered to come to things like this before, who turned out to watch Her Late Majesty go past. And I think it has commanded immense respect and affection. And, of course, the fact that she died in Scotland, a place that she loved very, very much indeed, and is coming home to her royal palace at Holyrood in Edinburgh, I think is very symbolic.
And her final act, public duty, I should say, was to appoint a new Prime Minister, of course. Her first was your grandfather, and if reports are to be believed, he was her favourite.
Well, I don't know about that at all, but my grandfather had known the Queen since she was a child. I mean, you and I, Mark, I mean, I'm much older than you are, but frankly, we've only grown up with one sovereign. Churchill grew up in the reigns of 6 sovereigns and served 6 sovereigns in his lifetime. And he had the most profound reverence and respect for the Queen, who he had known since she was a little girl. And yes. He had great faith in her. And I think it's absolutely clear that all that marvellous new Elizabethan age he talked about was admirably fulfilled by 70 years of impeccable service by the Queen.
And what do you think was so special about the relationship between the Queen and your grandfather?
Well, I don't think it's possible to tell. I mean, I think the fact that obviously my grandfather had been her father's prime minister throughout the war, they strongly depended on each other. My grandfather grew great strength from the king, and I think the king, vice versa with the king, and they became very close. And the Queen will have known that, and of course she inherited entirely the throne entirely by accident. I mean, her uncle abdicated, her father died very young, really. And she inherited without, as she said, without any apprenticeship at all. And I think he was able to provide tremendous stability and experience for her. And I don't think he would ever have, I mean, he wouldn't have been felt as a patronizing figure. I think he was genuinely wise and sage, and I think she would have depended on him.
And Sir Nicholas, is your friend King Charles ready for what is to come?
Well, he has inherited the throne. The crown has passed to him. I think he is very ready. He served a very long time apprentice. He's sat at the feet of his mother, who must be one of the greatest monarchs this country has ever had. He's well aware of his duty and always has been. And I think his duty and service and loyalty to his people has been impeccable already. And he will now, I think, do this very well. But these are very sad days. And I think it's worth remembering that, you know, when you look at the royal family today, and those rather touching photographs of them yesterday looking at the flowers at Balmoral, one has to remember that, you know, they only lost Prince Philip 18 months ago, and now the Queen herself has died. And these are heavy days for them. And I think it's clear that the whole nation extends their sympathy to the royal family.
Indeed. And just finally, the very personal statements that we've had from King Charles and from his son yesterday, and all the walkabouts and the close contact with the public and the handshakes and the hugs, does this suggest to you a different monarchy emerging now?
Well, clearly it's a different monarch. So, and each monarch acts in the way that they think is best. But he's a younger monarch. He's well aware of the interests and the sensitivities of these people. He's extremely empathetic, the Prince of Wales. He understands very well people's feelings. And I think we saw the other night how strong is the connection. But these are very early days, and there are many, many bridges to negotiate. But I believe personally that this great machine of the British Constitution has seamlessly passed in a way that has been rather marvellous to watch. And I think it was very enlightened that the cameras filmed the Accession Council. I think that, you know, and I'm sure there'll be more of that too.
Sir Nicholas, it's good of you to come on. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, the Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has told Sky News that he will not hold a referendum on whether Australia should become a republic in his first term. In his first international interview since the Queen's death, Mr Albanese said this was a moment to show gratitude for the Queen's service. He was speaking to our correspondent Cordelia Lynch.
The sights, the sounds of a new sovereign, a ceremony for a new era in Australia, under a king. The Queen was adored here. In death, they honour her. Even those uncertain about the institution, the Prime Minister, a Republican himself, leading the tributes.
This is a land of cyclones, of floods, of natural disasters. And Queen Elizabeth always reached out to give that comfort to Australians at our time of need. And she was such a respected figure, regardless of where people stand on the political spectrum. That 70 years of public service, that devotion to duty, is something that holds her in such high regard.
Part of the success of Queen Elizabeth's reign here seems to be that people perceived her as being politically neutral. Do you think her son will be able to achieve that too?
I'm sure he's very conscious of the need to be above politics, and he certainly has always been that in terms of Australia. This, of course, is a substantial change. The only monarch that we have known in my lifetime and in the lifetime of most Australians has been Queen Elizabeth.
It's reignited a debate about a republic. Do you think in this moment that is appropriate or perhaps even opportunistic?
Well, I am of the personal view, and I've made it clear that now is the time for us to pay tribute to the life of Queen Elizabeth II, to give thanks for her service to Australia, to the Commonwealth and to the world, and that is the focus that I have.
When it comes to the monarchy, do you think, though, Australians want to see the institution evolve?
Well, of course, and it has evolved, and it will continue to evolve. It will need to continue to move with the times. But the bigger questions about our constitution are not ones for this current period. This is a period in which we are showing the grief that so many Australians are feeling at the moment, showing our deep respect and admiration for the contribution of the Queen to Australia.
She certainly had a powerful connection, and we've witnessed that firsthand here in Australia. And just to confirm, though, no referendum in your first term?
No.
In recent days, some politicians have openly pushed for a second referendum. But the man running the country isn't ready, and neither are they. They just want the right words to say goodbye. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Canberra, Australia.
Well, throughout her life and her reign, the Queen held a unique position on the world stage as the head of state for 15 Commonwealth nations. But beyond the Commonwealth, the Queen also wielded soft power through her enduring international popularity and as a key tool of British diplomacy. Our international editor, Dominic Waghorn, reflects now on the Queen's global reach.
Her Majesty went ashore, accompanied by the governor of Fiji.
She reinvented monarchy and took it to the world, from young Queen to global megastar.
She was incredibly popular. I mean, she was like this multimedia star.
Her lifetime of travels would circle the planet 40 times over. As the world changed beyond recognition, Queen Elizabeth remained constant, confidant and confessor to presidents and prime ministers.
What's quite extraordinary is the love and affection they had for her.
And champion of a Commonwealth of nations and its 2.5 billion people.
The ability to come to your level and tell you that you are doing a good work meant almost everything to me.
As Queen of Canada for nearly 6 decades, my pride in this country remains undimmed.
We've become used to seeing the Queen on the world stage, but it was a role she envisaged even before being crowned.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family, to which we all belong.
It was a promise she would honour from the very beginning, barely 6 months after her coronation, embarking on a tour of the Commonwealth. The royal couple drew enormous crowds.
Welcome was the word formed by some of the 17,000 children on Melbourne Cricket Ground. There was no doubt they meant it.
It was clear that this was going to be a very different kind of monarch.
The Queen, when she came to the throne, she was very young, but she had very clear ideas of how she wanted to shape her role, and definitively travel and international collaboration and building an international community, and particularly the Commonwealth, was so important to her.
The Queen and Prince Philip toured the Commonwealth for 6 months, taking in its vast size and diversity. By the end, the young Queen was already becoming a global icon.
It was Lower Broadway that supplied the ticker tape snowstorm.
The status cemented a few years later, when she took New York by storm. Americans came out in their thousands.
Inside the Great Assembly Hall, 2,500 delegates and their wives rose to greet the Queen.
When the Queen went on her visits in the early days, no one had any idea she'd be so popular. They had no idea there'd be thousands of people. The advisors were really quite surprised by the level of popularity, the level of fascination, the level of the fact that everyone seemed to be out there on the streets who wanted to see a glimpse of the Queen. And she was incredibly popular. I mean, she was like this multimedia star. She was like the ultimate celebrity, bigger than a Hollywood celebrity.
On the maintenance of understanding between us, the future of the free world depends.
She was already mastering the arts of soft power. Her personal chemistry with leader after leader would prove one of her most effective assets.
Saw her with leaders like President Yeltsin, and sort of, again, the level of conversation and confidence, ability to observe your discretions and secrets was very high, and I think, got on well because he respected the Queen of having some enduring qualities that are not related to politics or the stage at which you're at politically.
Very few could claim to be on an equal footing with the Queen. Nelson Mandela was one.
I mean, she could speak very frankly with him because he was a prince in his own tribe, so in that sense he had an easy way with the Queen. He's the only head of state I've ever heard call the Queen Elizabeth.
At home, the Queen hosted world leaders, some of them less savoury than others, but treated them all with the same decorum and royal welcome. Her role was far from just ceremonial. She had a diplomatic importance with a global reach and depth politicians could only dream of.
We in Britain have often underestimated the immense impact that the Queen had on the whole of the world. With America, she'd met 14 US presidents. Nobody in the world, not even in America, has met 14 presidents. And then taken a place like Ireland. She was pivotal in bringing about that rapprochement between Britain and Ireland in 2011. So a hugely understated but very significant influence globally. The monarchy continues. The monarchy will always continue. That's what it's designed to do. But will anybody coming in now have that same clout, that same footprint on world history? Obviously not.
The Queen and Duke of Edinburgh.
Driving the Queen's ambition above all was a passion for the Commonwealth, to see something good rise out of the end of empire. Its Secretary-General says the Queen played a unique role for all of its leaders.
You could tell her anything, and she'd never talk about it, and she had the wisdom and the generosity to listen and then to give really sage, quiet advice. And so I think if you had the privilege, as a number of us have, of seeing her interact with them, what's quite extraordinary is the love and affection they had for her.
I commend the Queen's Young Leaders of 2018.
But the Queen's love for people extended far beyond leaders and politicians. She had a passion for the youth of the Commonwealth. Like Derek Omari, who set up a charity for disabled children in Ghana, aged 19, singled out by Her Majesty for the Queen's Youth Leader Awards.
It was a day that nobody ever thought about. Knowing where I grew up, never ever thought of in my life that I'll even leave Ghana to the UK and then come all the way to the Buckingham Palace and be honoured. And one of the things that really left, that has gotten stuck with me was the chance to meet her in person, have a conversation with her, her humanness and her ability to come to your level and tell you that you are doing a good work. Keep doing it. Keep going on. And we are proud of you. Meant almost everything to me.
For Rihanna Patterson, recognised for setting up a dementia charity, the Queen was a personal inspiration.
She was a young person taking on this leadership role, and she had to kind of find herself in it quite quickly. You know, there was a lot of formalities, a lot of rules, a lot to take in, and it was something that was quite sudden. So I think she is relatable in that regard, like taking on a stance at a young age.
The woman who took on so much in her 20s will go on inspiring so many other young people like her for decades and carry on travelling for as long as her health would let her. The Queen transformed the monarchy, turning it into a globe-trotting multimedia phenomenon, years ahead of her time, letting Britain punch above its weight in the world and leading a commonwealth of nations. Her death leaves a void as she is mourned by hundreds of millions far beyond these shores. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News.
Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has been speaking about the Queen's legacy and Antigua's plans to hold a referendum on becoming a republic. Let's bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig. And John, Liz Truss off on this tour with the King. These political relationships very important for King Charles.
Yes, what's happening is that the Prime Minister's going to Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland with the Prime Minister, with the new King and Queen Consort this week. Sir Keir Starmer, meanwhile, was asked about comments by Gaston Brown. Now, he is the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, and he has talked about the possibility of a referendum on independence there within the next 3 years. He said this is not an act of hostility or difference between Antigua and Barbuda and the monarch. It's the fact, it's the final step, he said, to complete the circle of independence, as he called it. This was Sir Keir Starmer's response to a question about that.
Well, I think across the Commonwealth it's very important to recognise that every country will evolve in its own way according to their tradition and their wishes. I think the King will be an incredible head of the Commonwealth and has an ability to bring people together. I know that he has a very, very deep commitment to the Commonwealth.
Caribbean, there's talk of independence in Jamaica. There was criticism of William and Kate over their visit when they were criticised for shaking hands with the crowds behind YMS fences, giving a colonial impression by riding on an open-top jeep, which was considered not the right tone at all. So that is a challenge for the new monarch and indeed for the new Prime Minister. Now, this coming week in Westminster, there are many more events. In a few minutes' time, there's a service in Parliament's Church, King St Margaret's, just opposite the Palace of Westminster. Tomorrow, Charles and Camilla will be in the Westminster Hall, the old hall inside the Houses of Parliament, where they will receive speeches from the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, Lord Speaker, the Lord Speaker the Lord Speaker there, and also then we've got this tour coming up later in the week, and then Wednesday, of course, the lying in state also in Westminster Hall of the Queen. And I can tell you that around Westminster there are massive preparations going on already for the huge crowds that are expected for that.
OK, John, thank you very much indeed. And here at Buckingham Palace, still the people come, just this endless stream of people. They were here All day yesterday, all day today, still they come. There's no sign of an end to it, all the way down the Mall. It's very carefully controlled, but they come very slowly down with their floral tributes to pay their respects to the Queen. It's been another remarkable day, and this is why the Queen's cortege, we've been watching that for much of the day, a 170-mile journey it has made through Aberdeenshire, Angus and Tayside, Fife, before reaching Edinburgh. And now the Queen is lying at rest in the palace of Holyrood House overnight.
It is 6 o'clock. This is Sky News live from Holyrood House in Edinburgh. A last great journey. The Queen's coffin leaves Balmoral for Scotland's capital. People lined the streets and roads as the hearse made its way across Scotland. Before eventually arriving in Edinburgh, where her children paid their respects.
Buckingham Palace, where the new king has held meetings with the Commonwealth and the realm. As outside crowds gathered to get a glimpse of their king and the Queen consort, but also to pay tribute to the late Queen.
God save the King!
Also proclamations for King Charles III held around the four nations. And the Queen is remembered around the world, and in an international exclusive, Australia's Prime Minister tells Sky News there'll be no break with the monarchy in the near future.
It will need to continue to move with the times. But the bigger questions about our constitution are not ones for this current period.
Hello, good evening. You're watching Sky News at 6 live from Edinburgh. People have had their final chance to say farewell to Elizabeth II as a hearse carrying her coffin took a final journey through Scotland. Leaving Balmoral this morning, the cortege included the Princess Royal and her husband, Sir Timothy Lawrence. Well, it has now arrived here in Edinburgh, where it will rest at the Palace of Holyrood House until tomorrow afternoon. Sky's James Matthews has this report.
Through the gates of Balmoral, it was the quietest farewell. Rural Aberdeenshire, its birdsong and the rumble of the River Dee laid the soundtrack for a sight most saddening. The hearse carried the Queen's coffin wrapped in the Royal Standard of Scotland. The wreath on top was made from her favourite flowers, picked from the Balmoral garden. In the car behind, the Queen was escorted by her daughter, the Princess Royal, and her husband, Sir Tim Lawrence. The geography of circumstance had placed the Queen in Balmoral when she passed. At journey's end, there will be a state funeral, set-piece ceremony and all that. But between here and there, this was an informal farewell, an opportunity for the public to say their goodbyes. In Ballater, near Balmoral, they lined the streets. Here, they knew her as the Queen next door. Their village was her village.
We're so fond of this area. It's just a very, very sad day for us all.
Very emotional today and very proud to be part of the United Kingdom, so yeah.
It was so dignified, more than I thought it would have been. And the hush as she came through, and then you could hear the sobbing. I had a sniff myself.
I just found it really emotional. Just like, it's almost like saying goodbye to a family member. It's just really, really upsetting.
Tractors were positioned by the side of the road, an agricultural guard of honour, as the cortege wound a route through rural Scotland. Horse riders, too, formed up in a field by the roadside as it made its slow 6-hour journey south. This journey had been meticulously planned. Even if there was no public rehearsal, here in Banchory there was applause. Elsewhere there was silence. Everywhere there was respect and remembrance.
It was quite overwhelming, to be honest. I'm very, very proud to be here.
I've never come along to anything like this before, but just really felt that I wanted, it was important.
It's an honour, it's beautiful. Once in a lifetime, it's not going to happen again.
People lined dual carriageways linking Aberdeen, Dundee and Edinburgh beyond, and they looked on from walkways overhead. Closer to Edinburgh, the cortege crossed the Firth of Forth via the Queensferry Crossing, a bridge officially opened by the Queen in 2017. Members of the royal family had travelled ahead by helicopter to fulfil their duties. Once in Edinburgh, the Queen's coffin was driven through the streets towards Holyrood, in the city's old town. The Royal Regiment of Scotland formed a guard of honour at the Palace of Holyrood House, and the Queen's coffin was received with a royal salute. It's being placed in the throne room overnight to allow palace staff to pay their respects. The Queen was carried inside. A daughter curtsied to her mother, her duty done. This was day one of the Queen's long goodbye, which will span a nation that grew with her, and having learned of her loss, is learning to live with it. James Matthews, Sky News, in Ballater.
Well, Joe Pike is at St Giles Cathedral, where crowds paid their respects to the Queen. And Joe, the rain holding off until moments after the Queen's coffin made it safely into the palace behind me. But for you, amidst the crowds there, as the cortege made its way down Edinburgh's Royal Mile.
Yes, Anna, the crowds were 10 to 15 people deep, calm, pretty hushed as they waited hour after hour for a glimpse of the cortege and of the Queen's coffin. A real range of people. I spoke to some freshers from university, one who had arrived in the city to start a new life in their education at university yesterday, and what an introduction to Scotland's capital. Others, tourists who changed their plans to witness some history happen in front of them. The cortege passed this big Edinburgh landmark behind me, St Giles Cathedral, the High Kirk of Edinburgh, a medieval parish church that has adapted and evolved over the years, just as the royal family, the monarchy has. In front of it, watching over that cortege and that hearse as it passed, this statue of the 5th Duke of Buccleuch, a significant figure of 19th century Scotland, and a man who would have recognised many of the traditions, the ceremonies we have seen and we've all witnessed in recent days, because in the 1800s he was a part of them. Tomorrow, this will be at the heart of the next stage of Scottish commemorations. The new king will join the procession from Holyrood House behind the cortege, behind his mother's hearse, before a church service takes place at this kirk, at St Giles Cathedral. Then, Anna, there will be that 24-hour vigil to give Scots the chance to pay tribute to their Queen.
Joe Pike, thank you very much indeed there from St Giles Cathedral, the High Kirk. Well, the Queen and the royal family have been and are dedicated to their faith, attending, of course, that special Christmas service at Sandringham every year. And of course today, Sunday, the Queen has been remembered in churches right across the country. Katerina Vitozzi has been to a service in Liverpool and has this report.
She is the only monarch most of us have ever known. And today, at Liverpool Parish Church, the late Queen was mourned by some like a member of family. This was a special requiem service, a chance to remember an extraordinary life.
We give you thanks for her love of family and her gift of friendship, for her devotion to this nation and the nations of the Commonwealth.
The Queen's passing brings global cultural change and a new national anthem with unfamiliar words. Arthur Speed, who's 77, remembers the previous king, but the late Queen became his constant.
She was a one-off, wasn't she? What a lovely, lovely lady. Lovely. And when I was at sea, every Friday, 7 o'clock, we used to toast the Queen. But we've got to look forward to King Charles. Hopefully he'll do as good as his mum. I'm sure he will.
Church services like this one held here today and those indeed across the country and the Commonwealth have given people a chance to pay tribute to the late Queen. But in many ways they also reflect the way in which Queen Elizabeth II lived her own life. At her coronation 70 years ago, the Queen pledged to lead the Church of England. But the public pageantry was matched by personal faith. Seen in times of celebration like Christmas Day trips to church, or more recently at the funeral of her late husband. Her role as defender of the faith will be remembered.
Her late Majesty taught us much, if not more, about God and grace, both in words and the actions that reinforce them, than any other contemporary figure.
The Queen once said her faith guided her through good times and bad. It feels then particularly poignant that places of worship like Lichfield Cathedral in Staffordshire have become such focal points during this time of national mourning.
She was just like the nation's grandma, weren't she? Everyone just loved her. There was nothing not to love about her, really.
She's really important for everyone, and a lot of people looked up to her and thought she was amazing, really, and I did as well.
It's a sense many share, a feeling many will miss. Katerina Vitozzi, Sky News.
Good evening then from Buckingham Palace. King Charles III has held meetings with the Secretary-General of the Commonwealth as well as the High Commissioners from the countries where he is now head of state. Today's events are just the start of a list of duties for the King over the coming days. Sky's royal correspondent Laura Bundock has this report.
With flourish and fanfare, and from every corner of the United Kingdom,
3 cheers for His Majesty the King. Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray!
the pageantry of proclamation, and as his reign is confirmed, the new king already at work, head of the Commonwealth and meeting its representatives. He is for now head of state in 14 realms, but knows some are already questioning their royal relationship. Supported by the Queen Consort, these are important moments for the new monarch. And on top, meetings too, finalising his mother's funeral.
It's an opportunity for us to grieve. It's an opportunity for us to try and put some of our gratitude and remembrance into words. It's an opportunity for us to pray for ourselves and for our new king and his family. And it's an opportunity, I think, for us all to have a focus for our grief.
Buckingham Palace now has this almost surreal dual role. On the one hand, it is a focal point for people mourning the Queen. But as they gather outside, inside, the King is just getting on with the job, with his new role and responsibilities.
He is keen to reassure at this unsettling time, taking a tour of the nations. First stop Scotland, where there is a huge sense of expectancy.
I think he has been taught well by his mother. She's a great role model for him. And I honestly think we'll see a very compassionate king, a king who will look to unite the country.
I would hope he would continue along the path that she treads so well. I think he'll be a little bit more outspoken, I imagine, about environmental issues, because they're causes close to his heart. And I think he'll probably work to modernise the monarchy.
The King will also travel to Northern Ireland and Wales, creating connections and meeting people in the countries he now rules. Laura Bundock, Sky News, Buckingham Palace.
And Laura joins me now, so a busy start for the new King.
Absolutely. I think what's striking is that while the people here are gathered for what is the end of an era, let's not forget that the new era hasn't just begun, it is already well underway. And that's what we've been seeing as those trumpets were sounding out with the proclamations across the whole of the country. It was back to business as usual, and these important meetings now taking place. First up, of course, we'd had yesterday the political leaders coming to the palace, and today it was the turn of the Commonwealth. And the new King knows how important these meetings are. It was a cause incredibly close to his mother, as we know. But we also know there is a lot of feeling within some of those Commonwealth realms questioning, what their future is with the British monarchy. Do they want King Charles as head of state? And he will have been there, as we know, in Barbados last year, thinking exactly that. So it's very difficult, sort of diplomatic and a delicate meeting underway. And we're only a couple of days, obviously, into the job for him. And then, of course, meetings about his mother's funeral at the same time as well. So incredibly busy, incredibly important. And then moving on quickly to this tour of the nation. So Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales in quick succession, wanting to be seen, to be out there. And I think you get a sense of how, on the one hand, all this is going on and the flowers are mounting up and people are coming to pay their respects, and no doubt these crowds will continue to build, particularly here in London with the lying in state. But also, there's a job to be done, and day by day, the new King is taking on and taking over the duties of that job.
And just briefly, are we learning a little bit each day about the style of this monarchy, what it may look like?
I think we are, and I think the walkabouts say an awful lot. That wanting to be there in the crowd, wanting to take the crowd with him on this journey as he takes over such a big and important role. So going to all the different nations, very much keen to be seen among the people. He obviously needs the support of the people. He needs their trust. He won't have the 7 decades that his mother had in the role, so he will want to do as much as he can. And I think the cheers when he sort of comes into the palace, when he left the palace just recently, will probably mean a lot. He knows he's preaching to the converted here with these crowds. But of course, going to Scotland, being in Northern Ireland, being in Wales, are big moments for him as he, as I say, takes on and visits these countries for the first time as their head of state.
Laura, thank you very much. Well, I'm joined now by the former Chief of the Defence Staff, Lord Dannatt. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. And I guess I'm asking this question of everybody, really. Just those images that we've been watching all day, Lord Dannatt, of the Queen's cortege moving through Aberdeenshire and on to Edinburgh and the people coming out. I just wonder what you made of those pictures.
Well, I think we're witnessing truly dramatic scenes at the present time. And as your report has been covering just in the last few minutes, there's really two stories running here. Of course, the nation is grieving, and quite properly grieving, for the late Queen Elizabeth II, and the images that have been on the screens all day today of the motor cortege moving slowly from Balmoral to Holyrood absolutely sum up this aspect of our beloved Queen's last journey. But then today, all around the country, following on from the proclamation in London yesterday, there have been proclamations of the new King all around the country. We've been involved here in Norfolk up and down the county today. And so people are very much thinking in two directions. It's mourning the Queen, but actually also looking ahead with hope and anticipation to the new reign, to King Charles III. And forgive me for seeming at all presumptuous, but I think that having listened to the new King speaking on his first evening, it's been very reassuring to people that this extraordinary unwritten British Constitution is unfolding, one chapter ending and another chapter beginning in a very seamless sort of fashion. And I think this idea of continuity, I think, is very reassuring for people. Yes, we must mourn the Queen, and the state funeral will be really important on Monday. But there is a new chapter opening as well.
Absolutely, and for the armed forces, she was the Queen, clearly, but she was also Commander-in-Chief. How important was that?
Well, it's very important because all of us who have joined the Royal Navy, the Army, Royal Air Force, Royal Marines, we all, on our very first day, held a Bible in one hand and swore an oath of allegiance to the Sovereign. Actually, what one forgot at the time was we were pledging our allegiance to the Sovereign, her heirs and successors. So at the moment that Queen Elizabeth II breathed her last and passed away and died, that actually our allegiance moved to the new King straight away because our oath was to the Queen, her heirs and successors. So our allegiance is transferred quickly to the new King, King Charles. So that's another aspect really important of continuity. And again, this is another really important aspect about the wonderful British Constitution. Those of us who serve in uniform risk life and limb for the nation. We don't do it for the government or the Prime Minister or the Secretary of State for Defence. We do it in the name of the Sovereign and for the people of this country. And that's very special. And it's a really key and core part of the motivation that makes morale amongst the British Armed Forces so high and our expertise, frankly, so good.
Yes, and just on a personal level, I gather you've met her a few times. Your wife, am I right in saying, was or is the Queen's representative in Norfolk, Lord Lieutenant? Is that right? So you've met them, met the Queen a few times. Give us a sense of what she was like.
Well, you're right. I mean, I've met the Queen a number of times, as was my wife. And you say my wife is Lord Lieutenant of Norfolk. I think the thing about it, when you first meet the Queen, and I met her when I was really quite a young man, like everybody meeting her for the first time, you're a little bit panic-struck. You're not quite sure what to say and what to do. But if you're fortunate enough to meet her on more than one occasion, then actually you can get through that sort of blind panic bit and actually realise that you've got a very human, very inquiring, very interesting, very sympathetic person. And actually, I've sat next to her at lunch on a couple of occasions, and you get to talk in an extended period of time, and you realise that you're talking to a very well-read, very well-informed, given the age difference, sort of grandmother-type figure. And that is a huge privilege and a huge pleasure. There was, I would say, nobody better informed about what was going on in this country than the late Queen, right up until her last day, last Thursday. You just see the pictures of saying goodbye to her 14th Prime Minister and welcoming her 15th last Tuesday. Absolutely on the ball, frail, but on the ball, and then died less than 48 hours later. That's real devotion to duty. That's what soldiers, sailors, airmen and Marines really, really respect. Someone who does their duty and earns the right, therefore, to lead us. Very happy to be led by her, as we will be happy to be led by King Charles III.
And Lord Danek, I wonder if I could just have a very brief word with you about events in Ukraine. And it seems there has been some potentially significant progress by the Ukrainian forces in the last, few days.
Well, yes. What we've actually seen over the last few days is a very clever operational level design for battle. If you recall, just very briefly, they've been talking about an offensive in the south around the area of Kherson, the gateway to Crimea. And that led the Russians to move quite a lot of their best troops from the Donbass area around to the south to reinforce around Kherson. But in fact, what the Ukrainians have done is carry out a major attack in the north around Kharkiv. They've pushed forward a long way. They've captured Kupiansk, which is a major logistics hub of the Russians, causing absolute mayhem for the Russians. 5 railway lines come in there. All that has now fallen to the Ukrainians. So the Ukrainians have actually pulled off what we would call an operational level coup. they've done extraordinarily well by threatening in the south and then attacking in the north. It's deceived everybody. All of us commentators were thinking they were going to counterattack in the south, but actually they've made a major counterattack in the north, and it's been very successful. Just lastly, of course, the morale is a major issue here. I think the Russians' morale will be rock bottom at the present moment, with the Ukrainians rushing at them, while the Ukrainians' morale is sky high.
And just finally, do you think it could be a turning point in this conflict, or is it too early to say that?
I think it's too early. It takes more than one swallow to make a summer, but this is a significant move by the Ukrainians. The question is whether they can back it up, whether they can follow it up. They will need more and more Western high-tech arms and ammunition. But as you know, we in the UK have been training hundreds, thousands of Ukrainian infantry. Well, these are now feeding back onto the front line. Their skill level is going up, their equipment capability is going up, whereas the Russians are struggling with manpower, old kit, a lot of it that doesn't work, and now they're on the back foot. And the Ukrainians' frontline troops are tearing into their lines of communication. Their doctors and hospitals and nurses are all being withdrawn. They're in a muddle, the Russians, at the present moment. Question, how far can the Ukrainians keep this up?
OK, Lord Dannett, thanks very much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
Right, let's get back to events we're dealing with here, and the cortege of the Queen heading to Edinburgh today, and people here at Buckingham Palace still come in vast numbers to pay their respects. With me now is the former Royal Press Secretary Patrick Harrison, and just give me your sense of the day. I mean, here and those pictures from Scotland.
Well, they keep coming, don't they, Mark, as you said, and I'm struck by, we're now getting into the evening, it's dinner time for many people, but that doesn't seem to be the primary consideration. It's a very well-controlled operation. You can see them being held up there. They go all the way up the Mall, I think, and they're being let through gradually. And of course, I remember when I helped to organise the wedding of Prince William back in 2011. What you're seeing just here outside Buckingham Palace is a number of different agencies all working together: the Royal Parks, the Metropolitan Police, the Palace authorities, and of course the media as well.
See here, these images, you really don't get a sense of the people who are on either side of the Mall.
Absolutely.
And there's this constant queue, and they come and they pay their respects, and then they move on and more come through.
Absolutely, which is wonderful. And earlier on today, of course, as we've been reflecting, the movement of the late Queen's coffin from Balmoral down to Edinburgh. That was a very, very poignant moment, wasn't it, when we saw the coffin for the very first time. And it was the moment where we see the transition of the coffin moving from just the family out to the general public, and the general public lining the streets and quietly reflecting as it goes past and into Edinburgh.
And the new king, you worked with him as Prince of Wales for a long time. Is he ready for this, do you think?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, we must remember that he has been in public service for over 50 years. And, of course, in recent years has been taking many of the duties of the late Queen. So investitures, of course, for a number of years, as does Prince William, but also the state opening of Parliament we saw recently. He obviously represented the late Queen at the Commonwealth Heads of Government in Rwanda as well. This is a man who has spent his life in public service and absolutely ready to be our king, as I think we've seen over the last few days.
And he's, as we see here, I mean, receptions today, meetings today here, the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, High Commissioners and so forth. I mean, he's got off to it's an
incredibly busy schedule, but of course you have to remember these are all people that he knows well. This isn't somebody coming into a job who doesn't already have these relationships. He knows these people very well. He's travelled to many of the countries that they represent. And
it was the longest apprenticeship in the world. I heard someone say.
Yes,
the other day.
yes, indeed. And of course, he did all those public duties and those royal duties alongside his own interests as well as Prince of Wales. Those royal duties that he's done for many, many years continue as our king.
And this whole idea of William taking on some of the, I don't know whether he'll take on precisely the same issues as Charles, but he will move into that kind of space.
Yes, I mean, very quickly appointed Prince of Wales, and of course he's automatically the Duke of Cornwall, so now looking after the Duchy of Cornwall. And I think we can expect to see him also take on other duties in support of the king.
And finally, quick word, those images yesterday, William and Harry together. I mean, you know, it was on the front pages of all the papers. Yeah. I don't know how it was organised, who decided it should happen, but was it a good idea in your view?
I think it was a fantastic idea, and it was wonderful to see the two brothers with their wives chatting to the crowds there. And I think they took their cue from the king, who in that first heartfelt address not only paid tribute to his mother, but also reflected on his love for his wife and both his sons, William and Harry.
Yeah, Patrick, for now, thank you very much indeed. Well, throughout her life and her reign, the Queen held a unique position on the world stage as the head of state for 15 Commonwealth nations. But beyond the Commonwealth, the Queen also wielded soft power through her enduring international popularity and as a key tool of British diplomacy. International Affairs editor Dominic Waghorn reflects now on the Queen's global reach.
Her Majesty went ashore, accompanied by the governor of Fiji.
She reinvented monarchy and took it to the world, from young queen to global megastar.
She was incredibly popular. I mean, she was like this multimedia star.
Her lifetime of travels would circle the planet 40 times over. As the world changed beyond recognition, Queen Elizabeth remained constant, confidant and confessor to presidents and prime ministers.
What's quite extraordinary is the love and affection they had for her.
And champion of a Commonwealth of nations and its 2.5 billion people.
The ability to come to your level and tell you that you are doing a good work meant almost everything to me.
As Queen of Canada for nearly 6 decades, my pride in this country remains undimmed.
We've become used to seeing the Queen on the world stage, but it was a role she envisaged even before being crowned.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.
It was a promise she would honour from the very beginning, barely 6 months after her coronation, embarking on a tour of the Commonwealth. The royal couple drew enormous crowds.
Welcome was the word formed by some of the 17,000 children on Melbourne Cricket Ground. There was no doubt they meant it.
It was clear that this was going to be a very different kind of monarch.
The Queen, when she came to the throne, she was very young, but she had very clear ideas of how she wanted to shape her role. And definitively, travel and international collaboration and building an international community, and particularly the Commonwealth, was so important to her.
The Queen and Prince Philip toured the Commonwealth for 6 months, taking in its vast size and diversity. By the end, the young Queen was already becoming a global icon.
It was Lower Broadway that supplied the ticker-tape snowstorm.
The status cemented a few years later, when she took New York by storm. Americans came out in their thousands.
Inside the Great Assembly Hall, 2,500 delegates and their wives rose to greet the Queen.
When the Queen went on her visits in the early days, no one had any idea she'd be so popular. They had no idea there'd be thousands of people. The advisors were really quite surprised by the level of popularity, the level of fascination, the level of the fact that everyone seemed to be out there on the streets who wanted to see a glimpse of the Queen. And she was incredibly popular. I mean, she was like this multimedia star. She was like the ultimate celebrity, bigger than a Hollywood celebrity.
On the maintenance of understanding between us, the future of the free world depends.
She was already mastering the arts of soft power, Her personal chemistry with leader after leader would prove one of her most effective assets.
Saw her with leaders like President Yeltsin, and sort of, again, the level of conversation and confidence, ability to observe your discretions and secrets was very high. And I think, you know, got on well because he respected the Queen of having some enduring qualities that are not related to politics or the stage which you're at politically.
Very few could claim to be on an equal footing with the Queen. Nelson Mandela was one.
I mean, she could speak very frankly with him because he was a prince in his own tribe. So in that sense, he had an easy way with the Queen. He's the only head of state I've ever heard call the Queen Elizabeth.
At home, the Queen hosted world leaders, some of them less savoury than others, but treated them all with the same decorum and royal welcome. Her role was far from just ceremonial. She had a diplomatic importance with a global reach and depth politicians could only dream of.
We in Britain have often underestimated the immense impact that the Queen had on the whole of the world. With America, she had met 14 US presidents. Nobody in the world, not even in America, has met 14 presidents. And then taken a place like Ireland. She was pivotal in bringing about that rapprochement between Britain and Ireland in 2011. So a hugely understated but very significant influence globally. The monarchy continues. The monarchy will always continue. That's what it's designed to do. But will anybody coming in now have that same clout, that same footprint on world history? Obviously not.
The Queen and Duke of Edinburgh.
Driving the Queen's ambition above all was a passion for the Commonwealth, to see something good rise out of the end of empire. Its Secretary-General says the Queen played a unique role for all of its leaders.
You could tell her anything, and she'd never talk about it, and she had the wisdom and the generosity to listen and then to give really sage, quiet advice. And so I think if you had the privilege, as a number of us have, of seeing her interact with them, what's quite extraordinary is the love and affection they had for her.
I commend the Queen's Young Leaders of 2018.
But the Queen's love for people extended far beyond leaders and politicians. She had a passion for the youth of the Commonwealth. Like Derek Omari, who set up a charity for disabled children in Ghana, aged 19, singled out by Her Majesty for the Queen's Youth Leader Awards.
It was a day that nobody ever thought about. I, knowing where I grew up, never ever thought of in my life that I'll even leave Ghana to the UK and then come all the way to the Buckingham Palace and be honoured. And one of the things that really left, that has gotten stuck with me was the chance to meet her in person, have a conversation with her, her humanness and her ability to come to your level and tell you that you are doing a good work. Keep doing it. Keep going on. And we are proud of you. Meant almost everything to me.
For Rihanna Patterson, recognised for setting up a dementia charity, the Queen was a personal inspiration.
She was a young person taking on this leadership role, and she had to kind of find herself in it quite quickly. You know, there was a lot of formalities, a lot of rules, a lot to take in, and it was something that was quite sudden. So I think she is relatable in that regard, like taking on a stance at a young age.
The woman who took on so much in her 20s will go on inspiring so many other young people like her for decades and carry on travelling for as long as her health would let her. The Queen transformed the monarchy, turning it into a globe-trotting multimedia phenomenon, years ahead of her time, letting Britain punch above its weight in the world and leading a commonwealth of nations. Her death leaves a void as she is mourned by hundreds of millions far beyond these shores. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News.
I'm joined now by the documentary filmmaker John Brigcutt, who has known and worked with King Charles for quite some time. John, thank you very much indeed. And we'll talk about the documentary, Charles at 60, a passionate prince in a moment. But as I say, you've known him for 15 years or so. What kind of king do you think he'll be?
Well, I think we've already seen that he'll be quite an outstanding king, really. I mean, it's going to be a bit different. It's going to be the same and different at the same time. When he arrived at the palace gates and the way he got out of the car on the first day and shook hands with the crowd was quite extraordinary, I think. And the way that he wasn't worried about the number of hands he had to shake, the people who were kissing him from the crowd, and then the extraordinary address that he gave, which was both dignified, but also very apt and very well thought through, I think, and clearly his own words. So I think it's going to be a personal reign and quite a spontaneous one too.
And the documentary I mentioned, Charles at 60, A Passionate Prince, just tell us about that.
Well, this was for his 60th birthday in 2008. I did another one actually called Prince, Son and Heir for his 70th birthday. And this was really showing him at work. And I think people have not really appreciated the extent to which he really puts himself out for his charities. And he's got, we were listening just now to the amazing reach internationally that the Queen has had. And I think he will continue that because he's had so many decades of speaking to world leaders and being able to talk to them about big issues that concerned him, the environment and so on. So the documentaries that we did were looking at what it was like with him behind the scenes. And what struck me really was he's a very gracious man. And that's the first thing that really hits you. Very courteous, very thoughtful, but very demanding. I mean, he drives his staff very hard because he has so much going through his head all the time, and he will ring them up at odd hours when he's suddenly worked out that some connection that he's made between somebody he's met and somebody he's dealing with, and he thinks he can put ideas together to bring things about, not to make things happen himself, but to get other people to make things happen.
John, you put it in the title, Passionate Prince, and we're talking about these issues that he was clearly so enthused about. Will he find it difficult, do you think, to, hold back and sort of curb himself?
Well, I asked him about this in the 70th birthday film. I pressed him on the idea that, a lot of people feel he might meddle as king. And he said, no, of course I won't. I'm not that stupid. And it was a very direct and very important response, I think. He compared it in a way to the difference in Shakespeare between Prince Hal, who then becomes Henry V, and Henry IV, he's quite a law unto himself. And then Henry V becomes a serious monarch. And I think he knows the difference. But I have to say that the causes he is so concerned about and so espouses, I don't think will go away. I mean, I don't see how that's possible because he's a very passionate man about these things. And when he spoke from Buckingham Palace on Friday evening, he talked about Prince William as Prince of Wales and talked about the way that the marginal needed to come into the centre ground where they can be given most help. And he was talking about it in relation to his son, but I think that is the sort of idea that is focusing the way he will approach this monarchy. And I think he's not going to be politically controversial, but I think he will use his influence to bring things to people's attention, to convene. He talked about his convening power, the way he can bring people together and say, now let's make something happen. And I think that we may see that in the fullness of time.
Now, his mother famously didn't give interviews. We've heard from you.
She did, actually. This is a myth. She did give interviews.
Is it?
Yes.
She did one, didn't she? She did one which was more of a chat. Wasn't it more of a chat?
That's right. But she did an interview with Trevor McDonald about the Commonwealth in the 80s, I think.
Yes.
And,
I think.
And, there have been other ones. Yes, they're sometimes disguised as a chat. But I mean, by other...
All right, let's agree that she didn't do many. And
right.
So my question is, King Charles obviously did 2 documentaries with you. He's done several interviews. Do you think now he's king, he will give interviews and be quite so out there with the media?
That's difficult to know. I think he'll be very wary of that, but I don't think he will rule it out. You know, I think in the interviews he's done in the past, I mean, I can remember interviewing him when he'd been looking at coral reefs in the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. And he was apoplectic about the way that people would not take climate change seriously. They wouldn't take the science seriously. He said they take science seriously in every other aspect of life. Why not this? But I don't think he's going to be quite so passionate as that. I think he will hold back. I think he's going to be quite preoccupied with so many things that he will have to do as matters of state. I think the opportunity to do interviews will be rather less. So I don't think he'll rule it out, but it's not going to be the first thing he does.
And just finally, you mentioned that you know, things may change, a different sort of monarchy. I wonder, it will be a new way of doing things, do you think, inevitably?
I think that's right. I mean, the thing is that we've all got used to the way the Queen has been sovereign. Because she's been there such a long time, we think it's the only way. But of course, she was different from her father, who in his turn was different from George V. Every monarch has their own style. And I think he's talked about building on the example that he's been set by his mother. But I don't think that rules out having his own stamp on the monarchy. Each monarch is entitled, I think. And we're talking already about this Carolean age. And I think that will happen. Like Edward VII came up to the throne after Queen Victoria's long reign. He was only there for 10 years, but we have an Edwardian age, which we talk about, and it was only 10 years long. So I think he will find ways to be both the same as his mother, but also different. And it's about personality to a large extent. I think we're going to see a much more spontaneous ease with people, with the crowds. We saw that on Friday afternoon and several walkabouts since. And I think he has that natural, he's spent so many decades meeting people that he feels comfortable doing that, and he listens to what people say. And the interesting thing is he always finds a point of connection with the people he meets. I remember filming him in Durham when there were a whole lot of students sort of lining the street. It's interesting, actually, the number of young people who turn out to see him, although he's of advanced years, I might say. I think because of the Prince's trust, students know that he's responsive to young people. And when he was talking to them, we stood right far back, and he was so engaged with a dialogue with them while he was shaking hands. It was very impressive.
Yeah, well, good. John Brincup, we could talk for hours. Thank you so much for coming on.
Real pleasure. Thanks, Mark.
Now, the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has told Sky News he will not hold a referendum on whether the country should become a republic. In his first term, he said this was a moment to show gratitude for the Queen's service to Australia, the Commonwealth and the world. Here is that interview with our correspondent Cordelia Lynch.
Prime Minister Albanese, you have announced a public holiday to mark the Queen's death. Why was that so important to you?
I think it's important that we commemorate the remarkable life and indeed the service that Queen Elizabeth gave to Australia as our head of state for 70 years, the longest serving British monarch ever. But also a great deal of affection from Australians towards the Queen. And on Thursday, the 22nd of September, protocol requires a National Remembrance Day to be the day after myself and the Governor-General, the now King's representative in Australia, return from the service in London. So here, that will occur in Parliament House at the Great Hall. I've declared it a national day of mourning, And together with the states and territories, we agreed yesterday to have a national one-off public holiday.
The Australians' relationship with the Queen appears enduring. What do you think it was about her reign that achieved that special connection?
I think the Queen was with Australians during times of celebration. The opening of this house, Parliament House, in 1988, the opening of the Sydney Opera House during our great historic events, but was also with Australia at our times of difficulties. This is a land of cyclones, of floods, of natural disasters, and Queen Elizabeth always reached out to give that comfort to Australians at our time of need. And she was such a respected figure, regardless of where people stand on the political spectrum. That 70 years of public service, that devotion to duty, is something that holds her in such high regard.
How do you think the dynamic will change under the reign of King Charles?
Well, of course, it's the end of the second Elizabethan era and the beginning of a new one. King Charles, of course, is very well known to Australia. He did some of his, as a student here, was in Victoria. He's someone who's been a regular visitor to our shores. I think on a range of issues as well that King Charles has expressed opinion on over the years. Not party political opinion, but opinion about humanity's direction, the need to take action on climate change, the relationship with the built environment and its relation to our natural environment. King Charles, of course, is very familiar to all of us, and today we have proclaimed him the King of Australia.
Part of the success of Queen Elizabeth's reign here seems to be that people perceived her as being politically neutral. Do you think her son will be able to achieve that too?
I'm sure he's very conscious of the need to be above politics, and he certainly has always been that in terms of Australia. But he's someone who has a deep relationship with Australia. I hope that he is able to visit here on an occasion as soon as possible. But he's been a regular visitor here, and we're very familiar. This, of course, is a substantial change. The only monarch that we have known in my lifetime and in the lifetime of most Australians has been Queen Elizabeth. So this is a change. One of the reasons why I think Queen Elizabeth is held in such affection is that if you think about the last 70 years, it's been an era which has seen more change than any era in human history. The nature of technology and the way that it's transformed, the way that our society functions. Queen Elizabeth was able to change with that times in terms of her interactions with the public, and King Charles will, I'm sure, do the same.
It's reignited a debate about a republic. Do you think in this moment that is appropriate or perhaps even opportunistic?
Well, I am of the personal view, and I've made it clear that now is the time for us to pay tribute to the life of Queen Elizabeth II, to give thanks for her service to Australia, to the Commonwealth and to the world, and that is the focus that I have.
You've talked about the need previously to have an Australian head of state, but you said you won't commit to a referendum in your first term. Is that still the case?
Yes, look, my priority, and I said this before the election, and I've maintained it since my election as Prime Minister, is the recognition of First Nations people in our Constitution. Our Constitution at the moment would have you believe, if you read it, it's our nation's birth certificate, that history began in 1788. And of course, that was an important part of our history. But we are home to and share this continent with the oldest continuous culture on the planet that goes back some 65,000 years. That should be a source of national pride, and we should recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in our constitution. That is absolutely my priority.
When it comes to the monarchy, do you think, though, Australians want to see the institution evolve?
Well, of course, and it has evolved, and it will continue to evolve. It will need to continue to move with the times. But the bigger questions about our constitution are not ones for this current period. This is a period in which we are showing the grief that so many Australians are feeling at the moment, showing our deep respect and admiration for the contribution of the Queen to Australia. And today, of course, the transition formally here to recognise that with the Queen's passing, King Charles automatically became the head of state of Australia. But today we've formalised that with the ceremony. One of the things about, I think, the Queen's affection that she was held in as well is that there is that tradition. And we've gone through those processes here in Australia in the last few days. It's a sad time, but it's also a time to celebrate what is a long life well lived.
You will be attending the Queen's funeral. You'll be meeting with the King. How do you want to see your relationship with him?
I look forward very much to meeting King Charles. I have met him before in his previous capacity, and I had the honour of meeting Queen Elizabeth at Buckingham Palace, and Prince Charles was there on that occasion at the first meeting of the G20, and I look forward to, on behalf of Australia, expressing face-to-face, person-to-person, my condolences and the condolences of our nation for the loss, not just, of course, of Queen Elizabeth as the head of state, but as his beloved mother. And I thought it was a beautiful statement that King Charles made in his first statement as our new sovereign.
Do you think this moment, this pause for reflection internationally, might actually consolidate people's belief in the power of the monarchy?
Oh, look, that we will see what occurs. I think the important thing is, I think, to commemorate the moment that we're in now. And it is a moment of reflection about an extraordinary life. And one of the videos that I saw this morning, I remember seeing the joke video that the Queen did with Paddington Bear recently. And that says something about her character as well. That's one of the reasons why Australians, who were a pretty relaxed lot, can really relate, I think, so well to the life of Queen Elizabeth.
She certainly had a powerful connection, and we've witnessed that firsthand here in Australia. And just to confirm, though, no referendum in your first term?
No.
That's great. Thank you so much, Prime Minister. Really appreciate you speaking with us. And something we saw yesterday was just the amount of people who talked about her enduring legacy, no matter what people's perspective on the institution may have ebbed and flowed, waned over the time. She in particular seemed to really garner a lot of respect and love here.
Well, that's right. I think that Australians might have different views about the full range of views about the institution. My views are there very much on the record. But regardless of that, I don't think that gets in the way of an admiration and respect for Queen Elizabeth and for her contribution.
And so it has been a remarkable day. The Queen has ended the first part of her final journey, her cortege making its way through Aberdeenshire, Angus and Tayside and Fife before reaching Edinburgh here. The Queen will now lie in state, lie at rest at the Palace of Holyrood House overnight. Big crowds, as you can see there, welcoming, meeting, paying tribute to the Queen they have lost at the Royal Mile, lined with people. Tomorrow there will be a procession from the palace to St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh, where the coffin will rest for 24 hours to allow people to pay their respects. Coming up, Gillian Joseph.
This is Sky News, live from Buckingham Palace. Farewell to Balmoral. The Queen's coffin leaves her Scottish retreat as preparations begin for her funeral. The people on the streets to pay their respects and celebrate the monarch's life of service. The Queen at rest in her Edinburgh Palace before her coffin is placed on public display. King Charles will travel to stand in vigil for his mother as he holds more meetings with the Commonwealth and the realm. No break with the monarchy in the near future, Australia's Prime Minister tells us, as the country honours the Queen.
It will need to continue to move with the times. But the bigger questions about our Constitution are not ones for this current period.
And flying the flag for the late Queen and new King as the crowds continue to gather at Buckingham Palace. Good evening. The Queen's coffin is in Edinburgh tonight after she left Balmoral for the final time. Her journey, winding and taking more than 6 hours, took her through much of the landscape of the country that she loved so much. The movement of Her Majesty is the precursor to another week of ceremony. Tomorrow, King Charles will travel to Scotland for a service of remembrance and a vigil beside his mother. Tonight, we'll hear from some of the people who watched the procession today and why respect for the Queen will stop any chance of Australia voting to end the monarchy there, for now at least. But our first report tonight comes from James Matthews on the Queen's farewell to Balmoral.
Through the gates of Balmoral, it was the quietest farewell. Rural Aberdeenshire, its birdsong and the rumble of the River Dee laid the soundtrack for a sight most saddening. The hearse carried the Queen's coffin wrapped in the Royal Standard of Scotland. The wreath on top was made from her favourite flowers, picked from the Balmoral garden. In the car behind, the Queen was escorted by her daughter, the Princess Royal, and her husband, Sir Tim Lawrence. The geography of circumstance had placed the Queen in Balmoral when she passed. At Journey's End, there will be a state funeral and set-piece ceremony. But between here and there, this was an informal farewell, an opportunity for the public to say their goodbyes. In Ballater, near Balmoral, they lined the streets. Here, they knew her as the Queen next door. Their village was her village.
We're so fond of this area. It's just a very, very sad day for us all.
Very emotional today and very proud.
to be part of the United Kingdom. So yeah.
It was so dignified, more than I thought it would have been. And the hush as she came through, and then you could hear the sobbing. I had a sniff myself.
I just found it really emotional. Just like, it's almost like saying goodbye to a family member. It's just really, really upsetting.
Tractors were positioned by the side of the road, an agricultural guard of honour, as the cortege wound a route through rural Scotland. Horse riders, too, formed up in a field by the roadside as it made its slow 6-hour journey south. This journey had been meticulously planned. Even if there was no public rehearsal, here in Bankery there was applause. Elsewhere there was silence. Everywhere there was respect and remembrance.
It was quite overwhelming, to be honest. I'm very, very proud to be here. I've never come along to anything like this before, but just really felt that I wanted, it was important.
It's an honour, it's beautiful. Once in a lifetime, it's not going to happen again.
People lined dual carriageways linking Aberdeen, Dundee and Edinburgh beyond, and they looked on from walkways overhead. Closer to Edinburgh, the cortege crossed the Firth of Forth via the Queensferry Crossing, a bridge officially opened by the Queen in 2017. Members of the royal family had travelled ahead by helicopter to fulfil their duties. Once in Edinburgh, the Queen's coffin was driven through the streets towards Holyrood, in the city's old town. The Royal Regiment of Scotland formed a guard of honour at the Palace of Holyrood House, and the Queen's coffin was received with a royal salute. It's being placed in the throne room overnight to allow palace staff to pay their respects. As the Queen was carried inside, a daughter curtsied to her mother, her duty done. This was day one of the Queen's long goodbye, which will span a nation that grew with her, and having learned of her loss, is learning to live with it. James Matthews, Sky News, in Ballater.
Well, the Queen's journey from Balmoral to Edinburgh covered 180 miles. Her coffin started its journey from Balmoral shortly after 10 a.m. The cortege made its way to Aberdeen, passing through Ballater, Aboyne, Bankery and Petercuta, and crossing the King George VI Bridge. It then travelled through the Angus countryside, past Brechin, and then on the Kingsway around Dundee. Finally, it crossed the Firth of Forth and entered Edinburgh, driving down the Royal Mile to the Palace of Holyrood House. Our correspondent, Adele Robinson, was in Dundee to see that city pay tribute.
Etched onto the faces here, a deep, decades-long connection to the people of Scotland and Dundee. As the Queen passed her final journey around the city she'd become a regular visitor to, the mutual respect she'd garnered was apparent.
I think on occasions like this, you think of people you've lost yourself as well. Sorry.
Just very sad. She was a remarkable lady who loved Scotland, and we loved her.
It was a sad moment.
Yeah.
It was history being made as well.
Quite sad seeing her for the last time in Dundee. Yeah, it was quite sad.
But the students remember that Raleigh had an idea.
In 1955, a moment immortalised at Queen's College in Dundee as students laid their cloaks over puddles for Her Majesty to pass. Her visits have spanned the evolution of this city. and its industrial heritage and regeneration. The royal connection here is long and varied, but for a city historically pro-independence, there's always been a warm welcome for the monarch, proving that you can be a Scottish nationalist and an admirer of the Queen. Dundee's Lord Provost describes an unshakable respect from most.
I wouldn't like to speak on behalf of everybody, because some people have different feelings. But the feeling, I think, with the Queen generally that I've ever found is nothing but positive here. So, you know, she's highly respected regardless of what political party you are, wherever you come from. I really think that's probably the case everywhere, and Dundee's no exception to that.
A spectacle of grief and celebration. But for Dundee, the chance to say a final goodbye. Adele Robinson, Sky News, Dundee.
Well, Joe Pike is at St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh for us. And Joe, tell us what you've seen and heard today and what we can expect tomorrow.
Gillian, the rain held off until after the cortege had passed St Giles Cathedral and the Queen's coffin had been received in the throne room. Earlier here, crowds were 10 to 15 people deep, waiting many hours to wait to have a glimpse of the Queen's coffin and to pay their respects. A real range of people, some freshers, first-year students who just arrived at the university yesterday. This was their introduction to this historic city. Others, tourists who often visit the Royal Mile, many who had changed their holiday plans to witness what they could see today and will certainly see in the next couple of days here in the centre of Edinburgh. Behind me, St Giles Cathedral, the High Kirk of Edinburgh, this very historic medieval parish church, which will be at the centre of what happens tomorrow when there is a procession up the Royal Mile from the Palace of Holyrood House, and taking part in that procession, King Charles. Then there will be a service in the church, a church service, before that 24-hour vigil. Certainly there have been a lot of arrivals here in the last couple of hours. In the last couple of minutes, I've heard a fanfare. I think perhaps the state trumpeters are rehearsing for tomorrow. Of course, the hope is that the weather improves by then because it's pretty wet. Certainly, the crowds that were here earlier all walked one direction downwards towards the Palace of Holyrood House, towards the Scottish Parliament, which now seems to be the focus of thoughts and of people paying their respects, at least for the rest of this evening.
Joe, thank you. Well, as we've heard, King Charles will travel to Scotland tomorrow to accompany the Queen's coffin as it's moved to Edinburgh St Giles Cathedral. It's the latest step in his new role as monarch, which today saw him meeting senior figures linked to the Commonwealth. Our royal correspondent Laura Bundle reports on the new king.
With flourish and fanfare, and from every corner of the United Kingdom,
3 cheers for His Majesty the King. Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray!
The pageantry of proclamation, and as his reign is confirmed, the new king already at work, head of the Commonwealth and meeting its representatives. He is for now head of state in 14 realms, but knows some are already questioning their royal relationship. Supported by the Queen Consort, these are important moments for the new monarch. And on top, meetings too, finalising his mother's funeral.
It's an opportunity for us to grieve. It's an opportunity for us to try and put some of our gratitude and remembrance into words. It's an opportunity for us to pray for ourselves and for our new king and his family. And it's an opportunity, I think, for us all to have a focus for our grief.
Buckingham Palace now has this almost surreal dual role. On the one hand, it is a focal point for people mourning the Queen. But as they gather outside, inside, the King is just getting on with the job, with his new role and responsibilities. He is keen to reassure at this unsettling time, taking a tour of the nations. First stop Scotland, where there is a huge sense of expectancy.
I think he has been taught well by his mother. She's a great role model for him. And I honestly think we'll see a very compassionate king, a king who will look to unite the country.
I would hope he would continue along the path that she treads so well. I think he'll be a little bit more outspoken, I imagine, about environmental issues, because they're causes close to his heart. And I think he'll probably work to modernise the monarchy.
The King will also travel to Northern Ireland and Wales, creating connections and meeting people in the countries he now rules. Laura Bundock, Sky News, Buckingham Palace.
Let's look ahead now in more detail to the next 10 days and the schedule of events. Tomorrow, the House of Commons and the House of Lords will come together in Westminster Hall for a motion of condolence, which King Charles will attend and make a speech. After that, the King and Queen Consort will fly to Edinburgh and go to the Palace of Holyrood House. Once there, they'll join a procession where the Queen's coffin will be taken from Holyrood House to St Giles Cathedral in the city. The procession leaves Holyrood at 2:35 p.m. and a service takes place at the cathedral at 3 p.m. The King will then return to Holyrood for an audience with Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. He will also attend the Scottish Parliament to deliver a speech. In the evening, the King will hold a vigil with members of the royal family at St Giles's Cathedral. On Tuesday, the Queen's coffin will be taken to Edinburgh Airport and flown to RAF Northolt. The coffin will then be transported to Buckingham Palace by road to rest in the Bow Room. Meanwhile, the King will travel to Belfast and visit Hillsborough Castle. In Belfast, the King will meet the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland and party leaders. King Charles will receive messages of condolence and deliver a speech. The King and Queen Consort will also visit St Anne's Cathedral for a service of prayer and reflection. After the service, they'll leave Belfast and return to London. On Wednesday at 2:22 p.m, the King will lead the procession carrying the Queen's coffin to the Palace of Westminster, where the Archbishop of Canterbury will conduct a short service. The Queen's lying in state will then begin in Westminster Hall, and it will last 4 days. On the morning of Monday, the 19th of September, the lying in state ends, and the Queen's coffin will be taken in procession to Westminster Abbey for the state funeral service. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is in Westminster for us. And John, the King will travel there to address MPs. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, you'll recall that yesterday both the House of Commons and the House of Lords unanimously passed what they call a humble address to His Majesty, pledging loyalty, expressing sorrow for the death of his mother. That all went through last night after 2 days of tributes in both houses, and some senior politicians from the government and the opposition parties taking their oaths to the new King. So what happens is he's coming to Westminster, and in Westminster Hall, first of all, there will be a speech from Sir Lindsay Hoyle, the Commons Speaker, conveying what MPs have discussed over the past couple of days. Excuse me. Then it's the turn of the Lord Speaker, Lord McFall, and then the King will make a speech talking about obviously his constitutional role. It's not long since he was in Parliament. It's only a matter of months, because of course he stood in for his mother, the Queen, at the last state opening of Parliament, when she was her mobility problems meant she couldn't do that. So yet again we are seeing the former Prince of Wales, the new King, really taking centre stage in the links between the monarch and Parliament. Now, after that, of course, he goes on this tour of the devolved administrations. The tricky one really is the visit to Northern Ireland, because of course there is no devolved government at the moment, and no doubt the monarch will have a view about that. Certainly the British government has been trying to get the feuding Northern Ireland parties to work together. Obviously, Scotland and Wales have both got established First Ministers and governments there, but the Northern Ireland one is the really tricky political one. And then, of course, on the Queen's body lying in state in Westminster Hall, I can tell you, Gillian, preparations here in Westminster are already going on for that. They are making preparations for massive crowds. There are marquees, there are all sorts of areas being set up for people to queue. And I remember 20 years or so ago now, when the Queen Mother died, of